Yo, what's up? Let me know if you can hear me now. Sorry, I just ended that last stream pretty abruptly. My apologies. Because somebody in my chat said I had zero audio and that I wasn't streaming to a category, which doesn't really make sense because you can't even start streaming without hooking up to a category. Like, it won't even let me start. So I did that and I double checked the audio and it was there. But you got it. I got it now. Great. Awesome. Fix. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. But the last video did save. It just needs a little time to upload. So then you can go back and listen to those pages. But I'm going to start on page 36. Here we go on Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. It's nice to have you here. Hello. Pretty intense. Again, always. Most of the books I'm going to be reading, trigger warning, sexual assault, violence, torture against women. It's not great. Not a good time. But here we go. Back into it. We have far more than 87,000 rapes in this country every year. But each of them is invariably portrayed as an isolated incident. We have dots so close, they are splatters melting into a stain, but hardly anyone connects them or names that stain. In India, they did. They said that this is a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. It's everyone's problem. It's not isolated, and it's never going to be acceptable again. It has to change. It's your job to change it, and mine, and ours. Thank you so much. It says you should also stream to a category for discovery purpose. Thank you. Appreciate that. So now we are at chapter 3. All right. So the chapter 2 picture was that woman in the water whipping her hair around, kind of looking pretty free, actually. And this woman is mopping up what seems to be an ocean. So never ending cleaning. It's never going to end for her. Chapter 3. Whew. Okay. Now, this is a lot. This is a bunch of different essays put together. Worlds Collide in a Luxury Suite, essay from 2011. Some thoughts on the IMF, global injustice, and a stranger on a train. A bunch of random things that she's choosing to talk about, but let's get into it. How can I tell a story we already know too well? Her name was Africa. His was France. He colonized her, exploited her, silenced her. Decades after it was supposed to be ended, still acted with a high hand in resolving her affairs in places like Côte d'Ivoire, the Ivory Coast, a name she had been given because of her export products, not her own identity. Her name was Asia, his was Europe. Her name was silence, his was power. Her name was poverty, his was wealth. I think we know where this is going. Her name was her, but what was hers? His name was his, and he presumed everything was his, including her. And he thought he could take her without asking and without consequences. It was a very old story, though its outcome had been changing a little in recent decades. And this time, around the consequences are shaking, and this time, around the consequences are shaking a lot of foundations. Got it. All of which clearly needed shaking. Who would ever write a fable as obvious, as heavy-handed as the story we've just been given? The extraordinarily powerful head of the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Once again, that's the International Monetary Fund, IMF. A global organization that has caused mass poverty and economic injustice, allegedly assaulted a hotel maid, an immigrant from Africa, in a hotel's luxury suite in New York City. This happens, I can only assume, every single day here in New York. Worlds have collided. In an earlier era, her word would have been worthless against his, and she might not have filed charges, or the police might not have followed through and yanked Dominique Strauss-Kahn off a plane to Paris at the last moment. Dominic. I said Dominique. That is absolutely incorrect. It's Dominic. Dumbass. I'm keeping the dog, dumbass. But she did, and they did, and now he's in custody, and the economy of Europe has been dealt a blow, and French politics have been upended, and that nation is reeling and soul-searching at that time. What were they thinking? These men have decided to give him this singular position of power despite all the stories and evidence of such viciousness. What was he thinking when he decided he could get away with it? Did he think he was in France, where apparently he did get away with it? Only now is a young woman who says he assaulted her in 2002, pressing charges. Her own politician mother talked her out of it, and she worried about the impact it could have on her journalistic career, while her mother was apparently worrying more about his career. Oh, that's sick. Runs deep, the patriarchy. Both men and women. Definitely the older generation of women. And The Guardian reports that these stories, quote, have added weight to claims by, oh, I'm absolutely going to butcher this name, Paraska Nagy. That actually wasn't so bad. Paraska Nagy, I think. A Hungarian-born economist, that the fund's director engaged in sustained harassment. When she was working at the IMF, that left her feeling she had little choice but to agree to sleep with him at the World Economic Forum in Davos in January 2008. She alleged he persistently called and emailed on the pretext of asking questions about her expertise, Ghana's economy, and then used sexual language and asked her out. End quote. I have... And so many women have. And it's not talked about as much as it absolutely should be, because I don't think people are ready for that conversation, but we're going to fucking have that conversation. Or one-sided conversation, as it seems to be right now. That feeling the pressure to just say yes because it's easier. Just to get it over with. Way more times than I would like to admit I have done that. In some accounts, the woman Strauss-Kahn is charged with assaulting in New York. The woman Strauss-Kahn is charged with assaulting in New York is from Ghana. There it is. In others, a Muslim from nearby Guinea, Ghana prisoner of the IMF, ran a headline in 2001 by the usually mild-mannered BBC. It's reported documented the way the IMF's policies had destroyed that rice-growing nation's food security, opening it up to cheap imported U.S. rice and plunging the country's majority into dire poverty. Everything became a commodity for which you had to pay, from using a toilet to getting a bucket of water, and many could not pay. Perhaps it would be too perfect if she had a refugee from the IMF's policies in Ghana. Guinea, on the other hand, liberated itself from the IMF management thanks to the discovery of major oil reserves, but remains a country of severe corruption and economic disparity. I do not know much about the world and the world economics. I really don't know very fucking little. And I hate that. So we're going to be reading about that later on, but let's stick to this topic at hand. This is an interesting header. Pimping for the global north. Oh, that makes me so uncomfortable. There's an axiom evolutionary biologists used to quote, recapsulate. I literally don't even know how to pronounce that. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. I love sounding like a dumbass because it's so relatable. Judge me. Whatever. You're not better than me. Ontogeny, okay? I've never used that motherfucking word. Ontogeny. It's the branch of biology that deals with... Okay, that doesn't even fucking help me. Ontogenesis. Oh, fucking ontogeny. Ontogeny. Okay. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. No, give me a fucking definition of phylogeny. This shit pisses me off. It's the branch of biology that deals with phylogenesis. That doesn't help me. Okay. She's going to explain. Or the development of the embryonic individual repeats that of its species evolution. Does the I literally gotta hear it again. Ontogeny. There it is. Does the ontogeny of this alleged assault echo the phylogeny of the International Monetary Fund? After all, the organization was founded late in World War II as part of the notorious Bretton Woods Conference. I don't know what that is. Would impose American economic visions on the rest of the world. The IMF was meant to be, here we go, a leading institution to help countries develop. But by the 1980s, it had become an organization with an ideology, free trade and free market fundamentalism. It used its loans to gain enormous power over the economics and policies of nations throughout the global south. Okay, thank you. That is what I needed. That description right there. However, if the IMF gained power throughout the 1990s, it began losing that power in the 21st century, thanks to effective popular resistance to the economic policies it embodied and the economic collapse such policies produced. Strauss-Kahn was brought in to salvage the wreckage of an organization that in 2008 had to sell off its gold reserves and reinvent its mission. Her name was Africa. His name was IMF. He set her up to be pillaged, to go without health care, to starve. He laid waste to her to enrich his friends. Her name was Global South. His name was Washington Consensus. But his winning streak was running out, and her star was rising. It was the IMF that created the economic conditions that destroyed Argentinian economy by 2001, and it was the revolt against the IMF, among other neoliberal forces, that prompted Latin America's rebirth over the past decade. Interesting. I did not know any of this. Whatever you think of Hugo Chavez, it was loans from oil-rich Venezuela that allowed Argentina to pay off its IMF loans early so that it could set its own saner economic policies. The IMF was a predatory force opening developing countries up to economic assaults from the wealthy North and powerful transnational corporations. It was a pimp. Maybe it still is, but since the Seattle anti-corporate demonstrations of 1999 set a global movement alight, there has been a revolt against it, and those forces have won in Latin America, changing the framework of all economic debates to come and enriching our imaginations when it comes to economics and possibilities. Today, the IMF is a mess. The World Trade Organization largely sidelined. NAFTA almost universally reviled. The free trade area of the Americas canceled. That's all capitalized. The free trade area of the Americas canceled, though bilateral free trade agreements continue, and much of the world has learned a great deal from the decades crash course in economic policy. Very cool. Let's continue on. Strangers on a train. The New York Times reported it this way, quote, "As the impact of Mr. Strauss-Kahn's predicament hit home, others included some of the news media began to reveal accounts, long suppressed or anonymous, of what they call Mr. Strauss-Kahn's previously predatory behavior toward women and his aggressive sexual pursuit of them from students and journalists to subordinates," end quote. In other words, he created an atmosphere that was uncomfortable or dangerous for women, which would be one thing if he were working in, say, a small office, but that a man who controls some parts of the fate of the world apparently devoted his energies to generating fear, misery, and injustice around him saying something about the shape of our world and the values of nations and institutions that tolerated his behavior, and that of men like him. The United States has not been short on sex scandals of late, and they reek of the same arrogance, but they were at least consensual, as far as we know. The head of the IMF is charged with sexual assault. If that term confuses you, take out the word sexual and just focus on assault. on violence, on the refusal to treat someone as a human being, on the denial of the most basic of human rights, the right to bodily integrity and self-determination. Quote, the rights of man, end quote, was one of the great phrases of the French Revolution, but it's always been questionable whether it included the rights of women. The United States has 100 million flaws, but I am proud that the police believed this woman and that she will have her day in court. I am gratified this time not to be in a country that has decided that the career of a powerful man or the fate of an international institution matters more than this woman and her rights and her well-being. Yeah, I know Kate Mann is maybe taking those words back a little bit today. This is what we mean by democracy, that everyone has a voice, that no one gets away with things just because of their wealth, power, race, or gender, which is why we don't live in a democracy, because that's not what fucking happens here. 2 days before Strauss-Kahn, am I saying that right? It could be Strauss-Kahn. That might be better. That's probably how it's pronounced, Strauss-Kahn. Screw me if I'm wrong, right? Whatever, it's fine. It's not fine. I should get it right. Strauss-Kahn. It feels like Kahn. Like I want to say it fancy. I want to say it like I'm British. Strauss-Kahn allegedly emerged from that. He doesn't deserve the British accent, actually. I take it back. From that hotel bathroom naked. There was a big demonstration in New York City. Make Wall Street pay was the theme, and union workers, radicals, the unemployed, and more 20,000 people gathered to protest the economic assault in this country that is creating such suffering and deprivation for the many and obscene wealth for the few. It was the last big New York City economic justice protest preceding the birth of Occupy Wall Street on September 17th, 2011. I remember that well, which had, to say the least, more impact. I attended on the crowded subway car back to Brooklyn afterward. The youngest of my 3 female companions had her bottom groped by a man about Strauss-Kahn's age. At first, she thought she had simply bumped into her. That was before she felt her buttock being cupped and said something to me. Carrying 3 grapefruits, a precious purchase in my impoverished era, and I thought those grapefruits. Here we go. Words are getting difficult now. I threw those grapefruits one after another like baseballs at the creep, and Privatization, free markets, and tax cuts. In one of the more remarkable apologies of our era, Bill Clinton, who had his own sex scandal once upon a time, told the United Nations on World Food Day in October 2008, as the global economy was melting down, "We need the World Bank, the IMF, all the big foundations, and all the governments to admit that for 30 years we all blew it, including me when I was president. We were wrong to believe that food was like some other product in international trade." Apologize for me flubbing so much. I feel getting a wee bit peckish, you know what I'm saying? My tummy's crumbling. And we all have to go back to a more responsible and sustainable form of agriculture. When you're not used to talking for long stretches of time, it's like a workout. Like my jaw hurts. I'm actually glad that I don't have many followers yet, because I feel like me saying that, some incel on here would make some fucking sick comment, and so I'm glad that I'm not at that level yet. I'm kind of nervous to get that level. I obviously don't want those in my stream, and when I get people like that, hopefully I'll be able to boot them out. He said it even more bluntly last year. Since 1981, the United States has followed a policy until the last year or so when we started rethinking it, that we rich countries that produce a lot of food should sell it to poor countries and relieve them of the burden of producing their own food. So thank goodness they can leap directly into the industrial era. It has not worked. It may have been good for some of my farmers in Arkansas, but it has not worked. It was a mistake. It was a mistake that I was a party to. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I did that. I have to live every day with the consequences of the lost capacity to produce a rice crop in Haiti to feed those people because of what I did. Clinton's administration were on a level with former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, 2008 admission that the premise of his economic policies was wrong. The former policies and those of the IMF, World Bank, and free trade fundamentalists had created poverty, suffering, hunger, and death. We have learned, most of us, and the world has changed remarkably since the day when those who opposed free market fundamentalism were labeled flat earth advocates, productionists, trade unions, and yuppies looking for their, protection. It's, you know what it is. Separated from line to line. I have to splice them together in my brain. Protectionist trade unions and yuppies looking for their 1960s fix, in the mortal words of Thomas Friedman, later eaten. Glad he ate those words. A remarkable thing happened after the devastating Haitian earthquake last year. The IMF, under Strauss-Kahn, planned to use the vulnerability of that country to force new loans on it with the usual terms. Activists reacted to a plan guaranteed to increase the indebtedness of a nation already crippled by the kind of neoliberal politics for which Clinton blatantly apologized. The IMF blinked, stepped back, and agreed to cancel Haiti's existing debt to the organization. And it was a remarkable victory for informed activism. Powers of the powerless. It looks as though a hotel maid may end the career of one of the most powerful men in the world at that time, or rather that he will have ended it himself by discounting the rights and humanity of that worker. Pretty much the same thing happened to Meg Whitman, the former eBay billionaire who ran for governor of California last year. She leapt on the conservative bandwagon by attacking undocumented immigrants until it turned out that she herself long employed one, Nikki Diaz, as a housekeeper. Because they all do. When after 9 years it had become politically inconvenient to keep Diaz around, she fired the woman abruptly. Claimed she'd never known her employee was undocumented and refused to pay her final wages. Yeah, that sounds like a conservative to me. In other words, Whitman was willing to spend, that's a lot of money, $178 million on her campaign, but may have brought herself down thanks in part to 6,210 in unpaid wages, Diaz said. Quote, I felt like she was throwing me away like a piece of garbage, end quote. The garbage had a voice. The California Nurses Union amplified it, and California was spared domination by a billionaire whose policies would have further brutalized the poor and impoverished the middle class. The struggles for justice of an undocumented housekeeper and an immigrant hotel maid are microcosms of the great war of our time. If Nikki Diaz and the battle over last year's IMF loans to Haiti demonstrate anything, it's that the outcome is uncertain. Sometimes we win the skirmishes, but the war continues. So much remains to be known about what happened in that expensive hotel suite in Manhattan last week, but what we do know is this: a genuine class war is being fought openly in our time, and last week a so-called socialite put himself on the wrong side of it. His name was privilege, but hers was possibility. This is like perhaps the only piece of hope in this beginning portion. It's the only hope so far. I do believe, if memory serves me correct, the end there's some more hopeful passages and essays. But yeah, fuck the rich. Eat the motherfucking rich. His was the same old story, but hers was a new one about the possibility of changing a story that remains unfinished, that includes all of us, that matters so much, that we will watch, but also make and tell in weeks, months, years, and decades to come. Hell yeah. Let's read the postscript about this essay. So this is a bunch of different essays. This essay was written in response to the initial reports of what happened in Dominic Strauss-Kahn's Manhattan hotel room. Afterward, through the massive application of money to powerful teams of lawyers, he was able to get the New York prosecutors to drop the criminal case. Okay, and there the hope has been dashed, and malign his victim's reputation with information his lawyers provided. Like many very poor people and people from countries in turmoil, oh, this is a name right here. Nafissatou Diallo had lived in the margins, where telling the truth to authorities is not always a wise or safe thing to do. Rarely is. And so she was portrayed as a liar. In a Newsweek interview, she said that she had been hesitant to come forward with her rape charges and fearful of the consequences. She had come out of silence and shadows. Like other women and girls who've been raped, particularly those whose stories threaten the status quo, her character was put on trial. Yeah, you have to be a perfect victim to be fucking believed. Front page headlines in the New York Post. The local Rupert Murdoch-owned tabloid claimed that she was a prostitute. The why a prostitute worked full-time as a union hotel maid for $25 an hour was hard to explain, so no one bothered. The Post was obliged to settle after she brought a libel lawsuit. I'm not sure what kind of lawsuit that is. People, notably Edward J. Epstein. Ooh, Epstein. Not that Epstein, but Epstein. I wonder. I'm just curious. Hold on. Moment. I want to figure out more about this Epstein character. American Journal. Terrible last name, you know what I mean? Oh, I can't even go down that rabbit hole right now. I can't even go down that rabbit hole. But no. I don't, not related. I don't believe. Not what I'm seeing here. Tell me if I'm wrong. Notably, Edward J. Epstein in the New York Review of Books formulated elaborate stories to explain away what happened. Why had a woman who witnesses was very upset, told a story of being sexually assaulted. Why had the alleged assailant attempted to flee the country in an apparent panic? And why was his semen found on her clothing and elsewhere, confirming that a sexual encounter had taken place? There was either a consensual or non-consensual sexual encounter. The simplest and most coherent explanation was Diallo's. As Christopher Dickey wrote in the Daily Beast, Strauss-Kahn, quote, claims that his less than 7-minute sexual encounter with this woman he'd never met before was consensual. To believe him, you'd have to buy the line that Diallo took one look at his pot-bellied 60-something naked body fresh out of the shower and just volunteered to go down on her knees. Yeah, yikes. Gross. Afterward, other women came forward to testify about being assaulted by Strauss-Kahn, including a young French journalist who said he tried to rape her. All right, I think it's pretty clear the character of this motherfucker. He was implicated in a sex party ring whose interactions with prostitutes violated French law. As I write, he's facing charges for aggravated pimping, though rape charges brought by a sex worker were dropped. I mean, rich people get away with everything. Rich men get away with it all. What happens in the end is that a poor immigrant woman upended the career of one of the most powerful men in the world, or rather exposed behavior that should have ended it far earlier. Okay. As a result, French women reassessed the misogyny of their society, and Miss Diallo won her case in civil court against the former head of the IMF, though one part of the terms involving what may have been a substantial financial settlement was silence. Which brings us back to where we began. Sigh. I'm going to stop there for tonight. I'm getting quite peckish. I have to remember to eat before I do this, because now all I'm thinking about is snacks. But we are up to page 52, and we're going to start chapter 4 tomorrow. Again, I apologize for cutting the stream. In my chat here said, somebody posted I didn't have any sound. So, yeah, that's never a good thing. Hopefully the sound will save, and I'll see if I can fix that issue. This one, is good, but yeah. If you want to go back, watch that so you can see that continuation, have all that make sense. Oh, thank you so much for watching, for listening, for participating, for giving me grace in my absorption of all of this new knowledge. It's a lot, It's just it's like being in a class, but a class with myself right now. And I can't wait to have more people here so it can be a little bit more discussion based. But I really appreciate your time and learning with me together, writing some of this stuff down. Or however you learn. That's one way that I get information. If I'm just listening and I'm not applying myself, it's hard for me to keep this information. But do whatever works for you, however you're rocking and rolling. Maybe you're just having this on while you're, cooking, doing the laundry, walking around town. You're gorgeous, darling. Stay safe out there. I know it's a really scary place, but the world is waking up, and we just have to keep moving forward and not go back in time. There's no way we can go back once, the information is out there. It's being shared everywhere. There's no stopping this train. So let's galvanize. Let's come together and let's learn. Let's use our voices and let's not be silenced. That's the No Club. That's our motto. Never be silenced. But I will see y'all tomorrow. Again, I'm not sure. I actually have a job interview tomorrow. So once I have a job, and once I have a set schedule, I will have a set time that I will stream, hopefully regularly. So I will catch you then. We'll get through these books together, get through this difficult material together. We got this. All right. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye. I'm going to have some snacks. It's actually dinner time, but I have 2 dinners. TMI.